Well, at the moment, as local authorities have told us, this is the most serious community outbreak that has been reported in Macau so far since the beginning of the pandemic. Since Saturday, they've reported 71 confirmed cases so far, and they placed more than 3,000 people under special medical observation, so basically quarantine.
What are the measures being introduced to try to curb the spread of COVID?
So at the moment, they've banned any dine-in, any restaurant dine-ins. They're only allowed takeaway. They've carried out a 48-hour citywide mass testing since Sunday, which has already finished. Today, they ask all residents to do their own rapid antigen testing. So we had today to do our own testing at home or our office, wherever we can. And they've just announced that because they discovered 11 positive cases in that round, they'll start another 48-hour citywide testing from tomorrow, from Thursday to Friday, yes.
Does this come as a bit of a shock to residents? Had life pretty much returned to normal for a while, or was this expected?
Well, Macau has been kind of in its own bubble since the beginning of the pandemic, because almost since the beginning, the local authorities have put in place pretty stringent COVID policies, very similar to what you can see in mainland China and Hong Kong. So we've had, prior to this most recent community outbreak, we've had maximum around 80 confirmed cases, all of them from people that had entered the city and stayed under quarantine and then were detected. So we've never had any local community outbreak and no fatalities so far.
It's good to hear that there haven't been any deaths so far, and let's hope it stays that way. How concerned, though, are residents not only about catching COVID, but about the restrictions being placed on them?
Well, I would say that at this point, the largest concern of most residents is not getting infected per se, but what would happen if one was to test positive. Because if one was to test positive, it would be taken to a medical facility and stay there for, I would say, if you're lucky, 14 days, if you're unlucky, 21 days. 90% of the population is already vaccinated. There is a certain percentage of the elderly population that is not vaccinated. They will be vulnerable, but in health terms, the population itself is not, I wouldn't say they're worried about catching the virus, but they're worried about what would happen if they test positive at this point.
That's understandable. How different is the experience for Chinese nationals in Macau compared to what it's like for foreigners?
Since the beginning, local residents of Chinese nationality, they've been allowed to travel to mainland China without quarantine, as long as they have a negative nucleic acid test. For foreign nationals, for almost the first year, we weren't allowed at all to enter mainland China. After a while, they opened it up for, if you applied for a visa, and you'd be able to get a 6-month visa with 2 entries maximum. So some people managed to go to mainland China, but for the most part, if you're a local resident of any nationality other than Chinese, you haven't been able to leave Macau, a city of 36 square kilometers, since almost 2.5 years, because even you're allowed to get out, but you know that when you come back in, you're going to have to do before a 21-day quarantine, now a 14-day quarantine. So most people just opted to not leave the city unless there's an emergency with their family back in their home country. Then they've stayed put most of the time so far.
And Nelson, when do you think the current restrictions might ease?
Well, that's probably the favorite game of people in this city, is to try to guess when there'll be an easing of restrictions. And we passed the last 3 years trying to point to some event, something that will happen that will lead local authorities to ease the restrictions. At this point, the guess is that they'll probably stay until the end of the year, until they can have the main session in Beijing in November. The president is expected to get a third term of his presidential term. So that's the main guess at this point. So I would say they'll probably remain unaltered until next year. we have already had some easing this year, where they reduced the 21-day quarantine to a 14-day quarantine for overseas arrivals, which was already a major breakthrough for us. And I would guess that my most optimistic guess is that with some luck, you'll reduce to 7 days in quarantine for overseas arrivals. But restrictions in tandem with what you've seen in the rest of the world, I wouldn't see probably until next year.
Well, Nelson, Moura, thanks so much for talking to us. Stay well.
My pleasure. Take care.